My friends, like you might have heard, a big air battle just took place between India and Pakistan. And just as things were escalating, India and Pakistan agreed to an immediate ceasefire. I didn't even have time to replace these flags, or even to learn some Hindi. Essentially, everything started when the Indian Air Force launched Operation Sindoor to retaliate against Pakistani-backed insurgents that attacked Indian tourists in the much contested region of Kashmir. As India launched airstrikes during the night of the 6th to the 7th of May, chaos erupted. Moments later, India and Pakistan ended up clashing in the sky. Reportedly, over 100 aircraft were involved in this air battle. All I can say is that India's operation was as successful as, flirting with an Indian accent.
Hey man, aren't we cool? Don't we sound really hip?
Because that next morning, Pakistan claimed to have shot down 5 Indian aircraft. A complete disaster. It seemed to have been a complete turkey shoot. But that's the Pakistani version of the story, which was recycled by the mainstream media over and over in many misleading headlines. Because in reality, these Pakistani claims don't even match the evidence that was gathered. I only see 3 options to explain what happened. Number 1, the French-made Rafale is trash. It might have been good against insurgents wearing pajamas and riding Toyotas in the desert, but not in the context of modern warfare. Macron, brother, give me back my Rafales. Number 2, the Indian Air Force is trash. You can provide India with capable equipment, but Indian training and force employment plays a greater role than technology alone. Or explanation number 3, Chinese military equipment is just overpowered. Because now the Pakistani Air Force is mostly using Chinese weapons. In my opinion, a clear case of pay to win. Or it could also be a combination of these 3 options. Trolling aside, there's one reason that nobody talks about that explains the failure of the Indian operation. But no spoilers, more on that later. So we'll go through all this and try to clear up this entire story. Oh yeah, and that's not all. After this air battle, both sides ramped up missile strikes and bombarded each other's military infrastructure. Disclaimer, in this video I'm not going to talk about the roots or the entire history behind the conflict opposing India and Pakistan. Maybe in a future video, but right now, we'll go straight to this enigmatic air battle and the missile strikes that followed. I also highly encourage you to check out the videos of Ateshwit. With his background in the French Navy and as a former Rafale pilot, he has very interesting things to say about what happened between India and Pakistan. And the good thing for you, his content is also dubbed in English. Welcome to History Legends, and here the latest news of the Indo-Pakistan conflict. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. As you know, some of my videos have been targeted with limited or no ads. So make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal to keep the show running. Thank you to everyone that has already helped, and welcome to the headquarters. What you have to understand is that a similar incident happened a couple years ago. After attacks against Indian security forces in Indian-administered Kashmir in 2016, Indian special forces carried surgical strikes against insurgent positions beyond the line of control, right inside Pakistan-administered Kashmir. What? Pakistan hiding insurgents? Well, that's something totally new that I did not expect. However, in 2016, Pakistan did not retaliate, and eventually the situation de-escalated. In 2019, the trigger was the Pulwama attack, which caused 40 fatalities in the ranks of Indian paramilitary forces. In response, on the 26th of February, the Indian Air Force decided to carry out limited retaliatory strikes on insurgent rear operating bases located in Pakistani-controlled territory. India's French-made Mirage 2000 fighter aircraft crossed the line of control and bombed what it identified as a training camp of the GEM group near Balakot, using precision-guided Spice 2000 bombs. Of course, India has something called the Spice bombs. However, this time in 2019, Pakistan did not let it slide and they retaliated. The next day, Pakistani aircraft went to bombard Indian positions in Jammu and Kashmir. And then it's India that responded. An Indian MiG-21 Bison was quickly sent up to intercept the Pakistanis, but moments later it was shut down. The pilot ejected over Pakistani territory and was captured. It was a real humiliation for India. And if things couldn't go worse, that same day, an Indian Mi-17 V5 helicopter was mistakenly shot down by friendly air defense systems, leading to the death of 6 personnel. Naturally, tensions persisted between India and Pakistan over the Kashmir region. Between March 2021 and December 2024, Pakistan reported several incidents of intercepting and jamming Indian drones and UAVs along the line of contact. Apart from smaller drones, these also included two Israeli-made units, precisely a Searcher UAV in October 2022 and a Heron in May 2023. In summary, since the 2019 crisis, Pakistan significantly strengthened its electronic warfare capabilities along the line of contact, mostly through Chinese-supplied mobile electronic warfare systems, ground-based jammers, and integrating them with Chinese HQ-9B medium-range SAM batteries. The idea was to create an electronic bubble or shield where enemy aircraft and drones would face degraded radar, GPS, and communication performance, thus reducing the target's situational awareness. A bit like when you're drunk trying to navigate through an EDM festival in search of the washrooms. And this electronic shield also increased the chance of a successful hit on the target. To top it all off, Pakistan has also conducted multiple joint electronic warfare exercises with China. Allegedly, the main focus was on defending against electronic countermeasures of Indian fighter aircraft like the Rafale or Su-30 MKI. Additionally, Pakistan has collaborated with Turkey to develop an electronic warfare platform based on the Bombardier Global 6000, potentially allowing for standoff jamming from deeper inside Pakistani airspace. How did India prepare in the meantime? Jokes aside, India actually focused on improving its strike capabilities against these insurgent camps across the border. Beginning in 2020, the Indian Air Force started inducting its first Rafales from France, and by December 2022, it operated 36 Rafale 4.5 generation multi-role fighter aircraft, 8 units of the two-seater version and 28 single-seat. Thus, they formed two Rafale squadrons of 18 aircraft each, the number 17 Golden Arrows and the number 101 Falcons. In response, Pakistan decided to upgrade from its F-16s it had acquired from the United States in the 1980s. But to do so, they turned towards a new ally. In December 2021, Pakistan announced the acquisition of at least 25 Chinese-made 4.5 generation J-10C fighters. It was explicitly framed as a counter to India's Rafale program. And as you can see during the early 2020s, the Pakistani Air Force massively shifted towards Chinese technology. However, equipment alone doesn't win wars. Pakistani pilots had the golden opportunity to train directly with China. For example, Chinese flankers like the J-11 have similar flight characteristics to the Indian Su-30 MKI, which the Pakistani pilots could fight against in combat exercises. Pakistan also had full access to the S-400 air defense system China imported from Russia, which is the foundation of India's air defense. Now, this is speculation, but there's also the strong possibility that Pakistani pilots or Air Force units have indirectly trained or exercised against Qatari Rafales, and thus gained full understanding of the potential vulnerabilities of the French-made aircraft. Fast forward to April 2025. On the 22nd, an attack by insurgents of the GEM organization caused 26 civilian fatalities, mostly among Indian tourists. Can you guess what the Indian government decided to do after that? Yes, exactly. They decided to strike the rear operating bases of these insurgents located in Pakistani-controlled territory. Now, starting on April 28th, Pakistan's defense minister stated in an interview with Reuters that an Indian military incursion was imminent. And disclaimer, I cannot verify if the following statement is true, but allegedly, on the night of April 29th to the 30th, Pakistani forces electronically jammed 4 Indian Rafale fighter jets, forcing them to retreat and make emergency landings in Srinagar. We don't know if this happened, but if the Pakistanis did scramble for enemy aircraft, then it definitely foreshadowed the following events. And it also foreshadows Pakistan's obsession with the Rafale. Any aircraft they see, Rafale. Drone, Rafale. Incoming missile, Rafale. Eventually on the night from the 6th to the 7th of May, the Indian Air Force launched Operation Sindoor. India bombarded 9 locations believed to host or be operated by the insurgents behind the attack on the Indian tourists in Kashmir. 5 bases in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir have been targeted and 4 others in Pakistan proper. Here you can see some of the locations that were selected and then bombed by the Indian Air Force. Allegedly, the headquarters of the GEM and LET insurgent groups were all neutralized. According to Indian reports, the Indian Air Force used some of its Rafale fighter jets to carry out this mission. I mean, why wouldn't they? The Rafale's AASM hammer-guided bombs can strike targets up to 70 kilometers away. These have also proven their worth in the Russo-Ukraine war. We can believe these were used to target bases closer to the border in Kashmir. Whereas the Rafale's Scalp EG cruise missiles that have a range of 250 kilometers were most likely used to strike targets deep inside Pakistan. All in all, it was announced that Operation Sindoor lasted 23 minutes. I think everyone can agree that this is a fairly reasonable performance. The entire story could have ended here and nobody would have really known about it. The next morning, Pakistan claims to have shot down 5 Indian fighter aircraft, of which 3 of the elite French-made Rafale.
Everybody stay calm. What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure? Stay calm! Wait. Everybody calm down!
According to this presentation by Pakistan, at least 60 Indian aircraft were in the air, 14 of them ID'd as Rafales, against 42 of Pakistan's most modern aircraft. They claim that this resulted in an hour-long aerial battle. I mean, it's not because they did a PowerPoint presentation that we have to take their word for it. All I can say is that due to the lack of projectiles we found, I struggle to believe this entire story. Yes, maybe there were many aircraft in the air, but that doesn't mean they all engaged in a huge battle. So how about we start looking at the evidence? We can confirm that at least 3 Indian aircraft were indeed shot down. 2 in Indian Kashmir, more specifically in Wuyan in Akhnur, and another in Akalia Kalan. So all 3 were destroyed within Indian-controlled territory. So let's start with the crown jewel of the Indian Air Force, the Rafale. It was reportedly shot down in Akalia Kalan, 75 kilometers from the India-Pakistan border. After the crash, locals found pieces of the aircraft laying around. This part here with missile launcher written on it is part of a Mika air-to-air missile. However, both the Rafale and Mirage 2000 operate them. But then the video showed the missile pylon, which is exclusively used by the Rafale. Then in the morning came more images. Here laid a piece of the aircraft, identified as a Snecma M88 engine. Without a doubt, it was part of the Rafale. And for those that are still skeptical, locals found part of the vertical stabilizer of a Rafale. And not any Rafale. Tactical number BS001. The first Rafale that India received from France.
Our men are shaken by this terrible event.
And if you're still not convinced, check this out. It's not because it's on CNN that it's necessarily false, but here they reported a high-ranking French intelligence official told CNN today that one Rafale fighter jet operated by the Indian Air Force was downed by Pakistan. How is it possible? Is it because the Rafale is trash, or because we should expect some losses in a modern conventional war setting? The Rafale's advanced spectro-electronic warfare system was considered highly effective, so the loss of such an aircraft felt like a real humiliation for French manufacturer Dassault.
Fuck.
With that being said, that's the only visual confirmation of a destroyed Rafale. Were the 2 others that Pakistan claimed to have shot down. The second wreckage was found in Akhnur, 15 kilometers from the line of contact. Here we can see the crash site, and apparently the 2 pilots made it out alive. We can identify part of the ejection seat. According to analysts, it appears to be a K-36DM ejection seat, which is standard on the MiG-29. However, it's also standard on the Su-30 MKI. So it could either be a MiG-29 or a Su-30. Now it's important to note that the ejection seat was located about 50 kilometers from the crash site. So theoretically, we could be talking about 2 different aircraft. But for now, the consensus is that it's all part of one aircraft. According to the latest footage that was released from the crash site, we can see an AL-31FP engine in the wreckage, which was specifically designed for the Su-30 MKI. So there you go, we have our answer. The third confirmed Indian aircraft was shot down in Wuyan, 65 kilometers from the contact line. On the crash site, locals found a Snecma M53P2 engine, which can only be from an Indian Mirage 2000. Ouch! Second hit for Dassault. Those are the only Indian aircraft that we can visually confirm as destroyed at the moment. I think a lot of the confusion comes from parts of aircraft that have been spread out, or debris of other projectiles that locals thought were part of an aircraft. For example, we have evidence showing the booster section and nose cap of a BrahMos PJ-10 cruise missile. Now this BrahMos cruise missile can either be fired by ground launchers, but we also know that the Russian Su-30 MKI was specifically modified in order to be able to carry these BrahMos missiles. Now, if 3 Rafale fighter aircraft had been shot down with complete visual confirmation, then I would have tilted towards the Rafale is trash, and that a lot of the problems could definitely come from the machine itself. But with only one unit of this model having been destroyed, is simply not conclusive. Apart from that, we also have visual confirmation of the type of missiles that the Pakistanis have fired towards the Indians. Parts of 2 Chinese-made PL-15E were found in India near the village of Kamahi Devi. That's really the only physical evidence we have of Pakistani weapons that were used. For the first PL-15, it was its seeker section that was found, and for the other missile, it was its propulsion section that was found nearly intact. From what I read, this can happen when missiles fail to hit their targets and run out of fuel. This is a Chinese long-range air-to-air missile whose export version has a range of 145 kilometers. As of now, Pakistan's Chinese-made J-10C fighters are the primary known operational platform for PL-15E missiles, but it's important to note that the JF-17 Block 3 could also operate them. The day after the air battle, Reuters released this article. US officials confirmed Pakistan used Chinese J-10 jets against Indian aircraft. And according to Reuters, US officials also said that 2 of the Indian aircraft were shot down with air-to-air missiles. However, we don't know which models were hit. Please, not the Rafale. I don't care any model, not this one. Well, it could be the Rafale. How about we compare the aerial victories claimed by the Pakistani Air Force, marked in dark green on the map, with the actual crash sites of aircraft that have been shot down, marked in orange. The only claim that is cross-referenced is that Rafale hit in the south, but that's about it. In the center, the Pakistanis claim to have shot down yet another Rafale, when the nearest crash site is from an Indian Su-30 MKI. In the north, the Pakistanis claimed 3 aerial victories around this one crash site. They claim to have shot down a MiG-29, an Su-30, and a Rafale. When at the crash site, we could only identify remains of a Mirage 2000. So this is a reminder to take the Pakistanis Air Force claims and its entire presentation with a handful of salt. Now the section that you all waited for. What exactly happened that night? If we go back to the map, we can see that all 3 of these aircraft were clearly shot down over Indian territory, indicating that they most likely did not penetrate into Pakistani airspace. I looked at all the different stories, and here's what I think happened. I believe that the Indian Air Force decided to engage the insurgent camps from within Indian airspace to signal restraint, avoid escalation, and let's be honest, because it's much safer than venturing straight into enemy air defense. And if an incident happens like in 2019, it would avoid Indian pilots being captured by the Pakistanis. Such requirements would have been demanded by Indian policy makers. It made sense politically speaking. On one hand, the Indian government had to react. The public demanded revenge. But on the other, India also didn't want to start an all-out war with Pakistan. I mean, as of now, these decisions make sense. We can also mention similar airstrikes on TRST camps from 2024. Pakistan also conducted airstrikes against Taliban hideouts located in Afghanistan. And before that, on January 16, 2024, Iran conducted missile and drone strikes against insurgent camps in Pakistan's Balochistan province. That's just what they do in this region. And this action didn't cause the direct intervention of Pakistan's Air Force. However, by doing so, Indian officials must have assumed that the Pakistanis would not react, and that they will let the airstrikes happen. One indication of that is that during Operation Sindoor, the Indian Air Force did not strike any Pakistani air defense systems, nor did they bombard all of Pakistan's air bases. That would have been a declaration of war, and that was not the objective of the operation. India focused solely on bombarding these insurgent camps, and in that regards, the mission seems to have been a success. The pilots were probably told this is a routine strike mission. Everything is going to be okay. How about we test all these beautiful aircraft that we have? Or it's also going to be good practice for the new pilots.
Hidden units, my lord. treacherously meant to ambush us.
Also notice how Pakistan didn't prevent the Indians from striking the insurgent camps, striking the incoming Indian aircraft, while they were still in their own airspace, and before they had even fired their weapons, would have been a clear casus belli. So Pakistan had to let the Indians strike first. At the same time, Pakistan could use these low-value targets as bait for the Indian Air Force to reveal all its assets. Because let's be honest, Pakistan clearly anticipated the attack. It's very possible that ever since April 22nd, Pakistan deployed its J-10C fighters in combat patrol, ready to intercept enemy targets. In the presentation by the Pakistani Air Force, we can see 3 of their units, and a total of 10 aircraft patrolling the sky at all times. As you can imagine, that is something that can become extremely exhausting for the pilots over an extended period. To add to this, we can also believe the Pakistani fighters flew at very low altitude, using Kashmir's mountainous terrain with its valleys and peaks, which greatly complicates radar detection and missile guidance. This can definitely give an edge to defenders familiar with the environment. Put simply, Pakistan ambushed the exposed Indian aircraft. While everybody's looking at the number of aircraft, whether it's a Rafale or not, the geopolitical implications of these actions are huge. But we'll get to that later. Anyway, that's the only explanation I see, otherwise it just doesn't make sense. Now the Rafale has sophisticated defenses, namely its Spectra electronic warfare system, which is designed to protect the aircraft from a wide range of threats, including air-to-air missiles. However, in real life, once you're detected, it's GG well played. It's like when zombies hear you move and spot your location. You're not going to rely on your baseball bat and jiu-jitsu skills to fend off an entire horde of zombies. The best is not being even detected by them. We can speculate that the Rafale went to carry an airstrike departing from its base in Ambala. The aircraft flew at very high altitude to save on fuel and drop its payload from a greater distance, thus avoiding enemy threats and staying all the while within Indian territory. That's when Pakistani fighters came out of their hiding spot, adjusted their missiles, and fired at the Rafale on its return flight, right after it had dropped the bombs. Had the Indian pilots anticipated the Pakistani intervention, first of all, they would have been more numerous, but second, they would have also used different tactics. For example, flying at very low altitude, all the while maneuvering and zigzagging to avoid being detected by enemy radars. Once again, everything points to the fact that they didn't anticipate a Pakistani reaction. One possibility is that the Rafale was ambushed close to the border and hit by a number of Pakistani J-10C firing a number of PL-15E air-to-air missiles. Since the payload is rather small on these missiles, even with a direct hit, it doesn't mean that the Rafale is immediately destroyed. It could have kept flying and trying to reach the base, but in very poor conditions. Eventually, it was GG well played and the pilots just had no other choice but to eject. So the main criticism we can make against the Rafale is its poor ability to sustain hits. Another problem is that the Rafale's Mika air-to-air missiles have a max range of 80 kilometers compared to nearly 150 kilometers for the PL-15E. So even if the Rafale wanted to engage enemy targets, it was massively outranged, and the only thing it could do was to quickly escape this kill zone. Even then, at a distance of 150 kilometers, firing a PL-15 missiles would take roughly 2 minutes to reach its target. I assume this would allow the pilot to start some sort of evasion maneuvers or call for help, but it's as if some of the Indian pilots were paralyzed and that communications were shut down. Another possibility is that due to communication breakdowns and with the entire confusion of this unexpected event, maybe Indian Air Defense mistakenly shut down one of its own aircraft. It's not the first time that such a blue-on-blue incident takes place in India. So what is almost certain is that the Pakistanis made heavy use of electronic warfare to gain dominance in the sky over Kashmir. First, some speculate that the J-10's KG-600 electronic countermeasures pod potentially jammed radar frequencies and affected the Rafale's radar and communication systems. However, in my opinion, Pakistan also employed aerial assets like its Bombardier Global 6000 upgraded by Turkey, or the Chinese-made ZDK-03 Karakoram Eagle AWACS to jam enemy radars and provide continuous tracking data to allow friendly fighters to fire beyond visual range. By the way, once again, in the presentation by the Pakistani Air Force, we can see an AWACS in the air near the Afghan border during this air battle. We can also believe that the Pakistani Air Force utilized ground-based electronic warfare systems, like Chinese-made LW-30 or JY-27A radar systems. One of the big takeaways is how Pakistan's consistent use of Chinese systems, fighter aircraft, AWACS, and air defense systems allows for better system integration and networked warfare capabilities. So we can believe that after the Indian aircraft dropped their loads, the Pakistanis immediately jammed all the aircraft that were the closest to the border, fired a number of missiles from a distance that were then guided beyond visual range. It's possible that some of the Indian pilots didn't see anything coming into their face. These incidents left the Indian Air Force in a very vulnerable and sticky situation. 3 of their aircraft had been shot down. So if we go back to the 3 options I laid out in the introduction, is the Rafale trash? I don't think so. But it definitely needs some serious upgrades. This incident showed some weaknesses in robustness, electronic countermeasures, and the range of its weapons. Now I'm well aware that the Rafale can also be armed with the Meteor, which has similar specs to the PL-15. But the big difference is that the Rafale can only carry 2 of these long-range air-to-air missiles on the fuselage underside hardpoints, whereas the J-10s can carry up to 6 of these long-range PL-15s. That means that on a one-on-one engagement, the Rafale would struggle. But I do believe that in these circumstances, any aircraft would have suffered equally. This leads us to point number 2. Is the Indian Air Force trash? Mistakes were certainly made, but these stem from political decisions, more than a blunder by the Air Command and its pilots. Of course, we don't know the full story. One assessment could be that the Indian Air Force lacked the capabilities to plan and face a threat outside from the initial plan. Or the fact that they carried on the airstrikes despite the fact that so many Pakistani aircraft were suddenly in the air, which would have raised the alarm bell in the Indian HQ. We can believe that in the future, the Indian military could prioritize the use of drones and ballistic missiles to strike insurgents based in Pakistani-controlled territory, rather than risk their own aircraft for such missions. Third, is Chinese technology superior? The US should be worried. Because from the little glimpse we got, the PL-15 definitely proved its worth on the battlefield. Same thing for the J-10C fighter aircraft, especially if combined with the Chinese trio combo box of radars and jammers. Who would have thought that the world would tremble in fear at the words, "Made in China"? Now we don't have the full data, but it would be interesting to see how many PL-15 missiles were fired and how many of them were actual hits. If we look at the map, 2 PL-15s fell very far away from any of the crash sites. The only explanation is that the Pakistani fighter jets spotted an Indian aircraft in this area. They fired a couple missiles but failed to reach their targets. That could explain why we have PL-15 fragments in one part of India and the crash site in another. But this entire beef between India and Pakistan doesn't stop here. It's not a surprise that the next day India refrained from using its aircraft. The Indian Air Force launched dozens of Israeli-made Harab drones, with Pakistan's military reportedly having shot down between 12 and 25 of them. In this video recorded by Pakistani locals that have never heard of OPSEC, we can see a 35mm Type 90 twin autocannon at work. In this one, the remnants of one of the drones that fell in Pakistani territory. Allegedly, one of the drones hit some sort of Pakistani military facility in Lahore. And then it was Pakistan's turn. In response, Pakistan targeted 15 locations, including the city of Jammu, as well as military targets like this airbase in Pantakot using drones and missiles. Some debris could indicate that R-73E air-to-air missiles fired from Indian MiGs were used to shoot down incoming drones. Allegedly, Indian S-400 missile air defense systems managed to intercept the incoming threats. This also marked the first combat use of the S-400 for India. More importantly, during this exchange, the Indians successfully spotted and neutralized one Pakistani mobile command post in Lahore. The Pakistanis quickly relocated their systems, like this Chinese HQ-16 mobile engagement radar moving along Walton Road in Lahore. As you can see during this second night, India performed much better because they were also more prepared. The following night, from the 8th to the 9th, both sides ramped up the use of drones and ground-launched ballistic missiles instead of using their precious aircraft, something we have also witnessed in the Ukraine war. Third night of festivities from the 9th to the 10th of May. India reportedly struck the Noor Khan Pakistan Air Force Base in Rawalpindi. Allegedly there, a Lockheed C-130 Hercules military transport aircraft was destroyed. In this one, Pakistani air defense intercepted missiles targeting the Rafiki Air Force Base. In response, Pakistan is said to have used medium-range Fateh missiles to target an Indian missile storage facility and air bases in the cities of Pantakot and Udhampur. Pakistan also claimed that they used a Chinese-made JF-17 Thunderjet to hit an Indian S-400 air defense system, with a Chinese-made CM-400 AKG hypersonic missile in anti-radiation variant. I'm still waiting for any visual confirmation of these claims. All we know is that Pakistani taxpayers are paying close attention as to how their money is being spent. And now it was India's turn to play. In the afternoon, India retaliated and focused all its missiles on Pakistan's Air Force bases. Here we have a fragment of a BrahMos supersonic missile found in Pakistan. All in all, India launched a missile strike on Pakistan's Shabas Air Base. It seems Pakistani air defense failed to stop that one. Here's the aftermath of Indian strikes on Pakistan's Rahim Yar Khan Air Base, where a massive crater was visible on the runway. India also targeted the Bolari Air Base and the Sargodha Air Base, which serves as the headquarters for the Pakistan Air Force Central Air Command. Overall, the problem is geographic. Pakistan lacks strategic depth, so all its air bases can easily be targeted by India. I was gonna say let's see where this goes, but Trump saved the day and both countries agreed to an immediate ceasefire. India also declared future terror attacks will be treated as acts of war. So even if this situation de-escalates, it's just a matter of time before another terror attack in Kashmir and for fighting flaring up again between India and Pakistan. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links are in the description below.